the channel and thanks for stopping by. My name is Elizabeth, or EK to my friends. I'm working on a really exciting project here that I've been trying to do for a long time, and it's a bioactive habitat for my two hedgehogs. I happened to stumble across this large reptile enclosure on Craigslist. It's a little bit smaller than what I wanted. It's right at about 8 square feet. I wanted to go 10 square feet because I have 2 hedgehogs to put in here, and I thought the extra room would be beneficial in terms of the bioactive aspect of it. But I also wanted to get the project done, and so we bought this enclosure, brought it home, and we now have to convert it into something that's going to be suitable for the bioactive. So what I've done here so far is I just did a rough layout with some plants and exercise wheel, feed dishes, some mock-ups of their hides. They're using their actual hides now, and I'll move those down eventually. But this was just sort of a mock-up to see how it all fit together and get an idea before we move on with the project. So I'm going to stop right now, and I'm going to remove all of these plants and all the furnishings from in here, and then my husband Craig is going to help me put in a plastic liner with a plexiglass lip here to hold in the substrate so that we can still see into it. And then once we get that done and the silicone has dried, we will come back and we'll start working on the substrate. And I'm going to record that process for you so that you can see what I'm doing as I go along. When I was researching this project, I did not find a lot of information on the internet. I did find a couple of blogs and vlogs and a few articles and a few YouTube videos, but none of them were really very recent. And also with the hedgehog bioactive, it's a little bit different from a reptile bioactive, and it's a little more challenging, I think. And I think that's one reason why there isn't more information out there, because I think that a lot of people try this and it doesn't work for various reasons. But I've had a lot of time in the planning stages for this, and I think I might have a handle on how to do it in a way that will be successful. And so I want to just document the process so that I can share it with you guys in case anyone else is thinking about doing this at home. I might be able to provide some information that would help you succeed with yours as well. Plus, it's just a lot of fun. All right, with Craig's help, I got the plastic liner and the plexiglass front into the enclosure, and we had to wait a couple of days for the silicone to dry because we want this to be leak-proof so that we don't damage any part of the wood from the enclosure with the moisture that will be in the substrate and from watering the plants. So this is all ready to go, and before I actually start mixing up substrate and putting it in, I just want to show you what I've collected for materials to make up the substrate. I have leaves, bark, and some white rot wood. I've got more leaves. I have a couple of bins of wood chips with some partially decomposed leaves in there. That's going to go on the bottom. And I've got some more leaves to mix in that are not decomposed. I've got one of my secret ingredients is guinea pig poop. We have some mealworm frass, more white rot wood. I have some powdered eggshells and some shrimp tails that I've powdered up for the isopods. They love that. I have charcoal for the springtails. Worm castings from my worm bins that I have covered so they don't dry out, because those are loaded with little microorganisms that will die if the castings dry out too much. Then I've got some unsifted compost from my compost bins, some sifted compost, and several buckets of sand, starting with the least coarse and then going to slightly more coarse, and then some pebbles. And then these last 3 buckets I'm not even going to use, but I just wanted to show you that I've been sifting this stuff, and I sifted a 5-gallon bucket of fine sand out that I'm not going to use because it was just too fine. So we have all that, and then I've got some soil, some topsoil from the yard, and some other organics if I need them, just to make up enough volume to fill this thing. But I don't think I will. I think I actually have way more than what I need here, But the problem is, until I start actually mixing it and see how it feels as it mixes up and what the consistency is, I'm not going to know how much of any one material I want to use. So that's what we've got, and Craig is going to come along here in a minute and he'll help me, and we'll get started. Okay, we're all set here. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do, and I showed you this earlier, that I put a piece of plastic lumber in on the bottom here to separate the left half of the tank from the right half. And the reason that I did that is, originally I did not plan on doing a drainage layer, but what I did want to do was I wanted to put some charcoal in here and water for the springtails to make sure that they had a surface that they were happy with and that they liked and that they could stay down there, and that I would have a way to get moisture to them if I needed it. But this whole thing is kind of evolving as we go, and the way I'm doing it now, it is going to be a bit of a drainage layer. So what I have is, I have this piece of pipe that we cut some grooves in on the bottom that I'm going to set in here, and that'll serve two purposes. If I need to add moisture to the lower levels of the substrate for the cleanup crew, I can just pour water in here without having to soak the entire layer of substrate and overwater my plants. So that's one purpose it'll serve. But the other purpose is, if I happen to get too much water in there, I can just take a piece of 1/4 inch aquarium tubing and stick it in there, and then I can siphon out any excess water so that it doesn't sit down there and have my plants rot and kill them. So in order to do that, the first thing I'm going to do is take the wheel, and I'm going to set the wheel in here about where it would go, and then I'm just going to take the piece of tape and tape that pipe to the wall so I can work around it. That'll hold that in place. And I'm going to take this away for a minute. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take this bucket of charcoal. Now, this charcoal is just charcoal. It's not horticultural charcoal or biochar or activated carbon. It's just charcoal that I pulled out of our wood stove while we were heating our house, because I wanted to have it. I don't need to go out and buy charcoal. This charcoal is perfect. I have some in a tank here that I've got springtails in, and they're loving it. They're doing fine. So this is the first thing I'm going to put in. I'm just going to dump this whole bucket in the water that's in there with it. And I'm not going to fill the whole space with it, but maybe about 3/4 the way back, like that. And then I'm going to, this will leave some air in there for them. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of fiberglass window screen that I cut out of a scrap, and I'm going to have to cut a hole in it here. Okay, so I have this piece of fiberglass window screen that I'm recycled, and I'm just going to fit this in here on top like this. And once that's in place, I'm going to add some of my substrate material in the back. And I'm only going part way with the charcoal because I want the substrate to be able to soak up some water as well. So put some of this in here to cover that all up. Okay, and that's enough of that for right now, I think. That'll hold that. That'll hold the screen down and keep any potting soil or anything from dropping into the charcoal. So that's that. Okay, now to start the other half, I'm going to add more wood chips, and these are wood chips that came from a tree trimmer last year. They dumped them on our property, so it originally had a lot of leaves and some twigs and just wood chips in. And the reason I'm using this on the bottom is because I do have leaves to mix in with the substrate higher up, but the leaves are fresh and dry and they're not decomposing. And so for the cleanup crew, they're going to want something that they can eat right away, and the decomposing leaves are much easier and more attractive to them. So I have 2 bins of this. I'm just putting this straight in without mixing it with anything else because I want to have a nice base layer here for my cleanup crew. Now these bottom layers have nothing to do with the actual hedgehogs. This is only for the cleanup crew because I'm trying to create conditions that they will thrive in, and I see a lot of people do not have success with these bioactive enclosures for hedgehogs because their cleanup crews die off. And a part of that is it's a really fine line trying to balance between keeping the bottom layers moist enough for the cleanup crew, but also at the same time keeping the top layers dry enough for the hedgehogs, and then at the same time having the substrate drain well enough that the arid plants don't rot and die. So this is how I'm trying to attempt this, is that hopefully all this bottom layer of chips and decomposing leaves and wood will hold enough moisture for the cleanup crew. And then I'm going to just tuck a little piece of wood in here. This is a surprise for later. I'll show you guys what we're going to do with that later. But for now, I'm just going to tuck it in there like that, put some substrate around it, and call that good. Okay, now I'm going to just stop for a minute and get my springtails and set them in. Now, I put most of my springtails in with my isopods, and so I don't have a lot of them in here. So I'm just going to take a few of these pieces of charcoal that I see some on, a few of the small pieces, and I'm just going to dump those in there for now, and I may have to add more springtails later. So I'll take this one. It's got some springtails on it. I'll set this over here, then they can work their way down into there. Okay, that, and I'll get a couple more of these. And this is... Okay. I have a few springtails on these pieces. Not a lot, but I'll add more later. They're sitting on the bigger pieces of charcoal that I don't want to take out of this culture for right now. Okay, so that gets the springtail started there. And now I'm going to just stop for a minute and set that tank aside and get my mixing tub out so that I can start mixing the other substrate. And then I'll be right back and show you how I'm going to do that. Okay, here we are. Now, I don't actually know what the best mix of substrate materials is for this because I've never done this before. So I'm just going to kind of do it by feel and get to where I think it's good, and then we'll try it. And this whole thing is really experimental for me because I've never done it before, and we're not going to know until we get everything in there set up and let it sit for a month or so to see how it works. But the first thing I'm going to put in is some compost that came from my compost bins outside. We make a lot of compost. And then the next thing I'm going to put in is a bucket of leaves. These are shredded leaves that will eventually start breaking down, and the cleanup crew can eat these guys. And then I'm going to start 2 buckets of sand, which this is really heavy. 2 buckets of sand. And then I'm also going to add, this is for the cleanup crew, I'm going to add some guinea pig poop because this is what I use in my isopod cultures, and they love it. They absolutely love it, and it's loaded with beneficial microorganisms that will help seed this substrate and give them something to eat until we get the hedgehogs in there in a month or so. I'm just kind of doing that by feel. I'm also going to add in some worm castings from my worm bins because these are loaded with beneficial microorganisms that again will help get this thing started, get it off to a good start while we're waiting for the guinea pigs to, while we're waiting for the hedgehogs to take up residence. And then the last thing I'm going to add is, this is mealworm frass from my mealworm farms. Again, loaded with nutrients and beneficial microorganisms. And then I'm going to just mix all this up. And I can tell already that I don't have enough material here to fill that tank, but I don't have a very big mixing tub here, so I'm just going to mix it all once, move it over to the enclosure, and then I'll have to do a second batch to fill it up. And this is really, really sandy. I'm not sure if I like that or not, but I think I might just add one more bucket of compost in here now. And hopefully that won't throw off my ratios too much, but I think we're going to need it. So maybe I'll put a half a bucket in and see how that feels. Half a bucket. And I'll mix that up. This is really a heavy, heavy mixture. And my big concern here, and I don't know again how this is going to work out, but my biggest concern is that the sand will work its way down through the other materials and wind up at the bottom of my tank eventually. And if that happens, I'm not sure what I'll do. I'll probably just add more on top. But we'll see. I did sift all this sand, and I got all the really fine particles out of it, so it's a little coarser than, it's definitely coarser than play sand that you would buy at the store, but I don't know, so we'll see. Okay, that's that. I'm just going to scoop this into a pan and start dumping it in. And we'll see what's what. We'll see how this goes with the other stuff that's in here. Also have half of a large bucket full of topsoil if I need to add that later as I get up closer to the top of the substrate. But we'll start with this for now. Because I'm using so many arid plants, I don't know if I want the topsoil in there. I think that might be a mistake. What I'm not putting in here, you might notice, compared to other people's bioactive enclosures for mammals, I'm not using any coconut coir or coconut fiber or anything like that, because I'm trying to do this using just materials that I can find here on our farm. Okay, so I'm just going to finish up getting this. We're not going to have enough here, so I will have to mix another tub. And I'm going to have my cameraman stop here in just a second. And I'll mix this off camera so that you don't have to watch me, and we'll be right back. I am back from mixing substrate, and I'm going to stop now because I have about 3/4 of a bucket of sand left, and I have a little bit of topsoil and some leaves, and that is about as much as we're going to put in here right now, I think. So I have a planter, an empty clay planter here, that is about the same width as what I want the burrow to be. It's a little shallower, but that's okay because that'll be on the front side and they can dig it out. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go off camera for a minute, and I'm going to dig out the back center of this, and I am going to plant this planter upside down in it as a placeholder so that when I put my plants in today, the roots will not grow into the area that I'm going to dig out later to put the burrow in. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to turn the camera off. I'll do that real quick, and then I'll come back and show it to you. Okay, so we've been filling up the enclosure, and we're down to our last couple of buckets of substrate material here. So I'm going to mix about 2/3 of a bucket of sand, 1/3 of a bucket of compost, and 1/3 of a bucket of topsoil. And then I'm going to add a few more leaves because we have some. And I'll mix all this up. And then we'll put it in and we'll start planting the plants, which is kind of what I've been waiting for. I don't think I really have to mix this very well because while I was playing around in that earlier, I noticed that when we mix it and then dig in it, it all comes unmixed anyway. So it's going to settle and be what it's going to be, but we'll start off here with it mixed up nicely. Boy, this smells like a nice fall day. It's 15 below zero outside today, and these leaves make it smell like fall. Okay, so I'm going to spread some on this side because it was a little low. And this is where I'm going to start planting my plants. So spread this out just a little bit more, and I'll even it out as I go. But get It's a pretty good start. Okay. So the first plant I'm going to put in is this snake plant, or Sansevieria. This is native to Africa, South Africa, I think this particular variety is. But before I put that in, I'm going to take a plug of Bermuda grass, and I'm going to stick that in. And I'm a little bit excited about this because when they arrived, these plugs were absolutely frozen. They were like little blocks of ice. And being that this is a warm climate grass, I thought it would die. But I'm just starting to see a tiny bit, I don't know if that'll show up on the camera, but a tiny little bit of new growth there. So I'm optimistic that once we get them planted, they will grow. So I'm going to put one right back here to start with. And then I'm going to actually stop on that for a minute. Grab my wheel and put it in place so I can see how much room I have to work with here. Okay. My next plant I'm going to put in is the elephant plant, and I've divided this into 4 stems to start with because they will spread and fill in, and I don't have a lot of room here anyway, so I'm just going to stick that one in. Oh, I just knocked a leaf off, but I'm going to just toss that down because apparently these leaves will tend to sprout and grow more. In Africa, the elephants eat this plant and they trample it and they knock the stems and leaves down to the ground and they just regrow eventually. They're very drought tolerant and they'll just regrow on their own. And I'm really just, oh, I've got 2 here, okay. I'm really just trying to get this planted in this spot because as it grows and fills in, it will screen this wheel a little bit. And these plants in the wild can grow up to 15 feet, sometimes maybe even 18 feet. So as it grows, it should provide some screening. Here's a few more little leaves that I'm just going to toss there, and we'll see if that's an urban myth or if it's true that they actually do regrow from leaves. All right, the next one is the Sansevieria. I'll put that right over here. I hope that I'm leaving enough room. This was one that I divided a few weeks ago and it hasn't filled in very much here, so that's okay. It's going to lose a little bit of its potting soil, but that's okay. All right, that'll be nice there, and that'll help screen that corner a little bit eventually. Next up is the first of the 2 lemongrass plants that I have. This is also native to the African savanna, something I never knew until I started researching this project. And so we're going to just stick this in the back. That'll be a nice big screening plant too. A little hard to get back in there, but that's okay. Okay, that's good for that. And then this little tiger tooth aloe is going to stay right in its pot because it's so small, I'm afraid it'll get knocked over. And tag out there. This will keep the hedgehogs from knocking it over, but it just gives us a little bit of visual appeal there. And I have to leave room for the feed and water dishes, and I'm going to put a little more of this Bermuda grass right in there. And what else? Over here, I'm going to put some, let's see, I'll put a plug of Bermuda grass here as well. I have 50 of these, so I can put lots of them in wherever I want. That's that. I've got to have I gotta leave space for a food dish in here. And then I have this other little teeny tiny, very cute little elephant plant, which is a different variety from the one I planted in the corner. This is a trailing variety, and right now it's too small to be trailing anywhere, but when it grows up a little bit, it kind of makes a nice hanging basket plant, but I'm hoping it'll provide some ground cover here and trail around. It's a little bit small. The hedgehogs might trample that, but we'll see. I'm not going to panic over that yet. Next thing I'm going to put in is, I think I'll put a plug of grass right in the back corner here. I'm hoping, you can see that the soil is really kind of loose. It's very sandy, loose soil, and I'm hoping that some of these, the roots from some of this grass will kind of hold that together a little bit. Then I have another lemongrass to go in front of that, because I bought two. It's the cheapest way to buy them. Some soil it won't need, so we'll just go with this right here. Okay, fill that in. Okay, and then I'm going to move around to the corner. Can you see if I'm over there? If I go back here? Okay, we have another snake plant. It's going to go right in the corner here, in front of this dried grass. It's losing some of its root ball, but that's okay because it wasn't that deep anyway. And then, as I work my way forward, I will put in another plug of grass or two in here. The thing with this grass is that I think it'll help, it might help, I hope it'll help the soil stay together a bit so that as the hedgehogs dig, they won't dig everything up. But the other reason I'm planting it in here is, other than the visual appeal and the aesthetic, is that the succulents that I'm planting in here have a very low nutrient requirement. And so they're not going to do a lot in terms of cycling the nutrients in from the waste from the hedgehogs. But the grass should have a slightly higher nutrient requirement, and it will cycle more nutrients, I think, I hope anyway, than these other succulents will. And that'll help with the nitrogen load in here from all the waste. Okay, next up is a Tradescantia. This is the only plant in my collection here that is not native to Africa. This Tradescantia is actually native to South America. It's naturalized in Africa, and in some places, like in South Africa, it's actually so invasive that it's been banned. It's illegal. So it's not representative of the African savanna, but it's another plant that has higher nutrient requirements, and so I am hoping that it will help with the nutrient cycling. And also, it's pretty, it's nice to look at, and it'll form a nice ground cover here. And it's a very tough plant, so I think it might hold up to some abuse from the hedgehogs a little bit more than some of these succulents will, because it's just a hardier, tougher plant. Okay, so that's that. And then as we work our way over, I have a couple more pieces of grass to put in. I'm going to put one in right here. It's not deep enough there. Deep enough. I'm going to put one more in right here. I don't want to put the grass everywhere because I do want to leave some open spaces that the hedgehogs can dig in if they want to, and I don't want them to dig everything up. And then here's my last little elephant plant, the Portulacaria afra, and this is a variegated variety, same plant, just a different variety, and I thought it just looked pretty, and this will grow tall like the first one that I planted. It's not a trailing variety. Okay, so that's that, and then I'm going to have one more plug of grass, and then I think we're out of room because I have to have room for food and water dishes in here too. That's the last of that. I can always add more of this later. I'm not sure how fast it'll spread, so I want to give it a chance. And then I have to have a little spot for a food dish, and then I'm going to take the last little bit of this substrate material and spread it around the top, and then you can see it in its final glory. I have more of these leaves, so if I have to add more leaves in the future, I can. But we'll put these in here, we'll put this in a little bit, and then I'll go get the isopods and we'll put some cleanup crew in here and see how that goes. Lots of stuff in here for them to eat. And it's pretty. I like these little honey locust leaves because they're small. I have more shredded leaves, but these guys are nice and small and pretty. But I can add more of those if I need to. All right. And that's that. Okay, so we are getting so close to the end of this project. The next step is to add the isopods, and they'll have a month along with the plants to get situated in the enclosure, and then we'll be ready to put the hedgehogs in. But let's start with these guys. I've taken out some of the leaves here so you can see better, but what they really love more than just about anything is this bark. And I don't know if you can see in the light, if you can see how many there are there, but there's a bunch there, and there's a bunch here on that end. And I'm just going to take this whole piece of bark, and I'm going to set it right in here, and then I'll put some fresh bark in the container here for the other ones. But I have so many of these guys. There's some more. And there's a few more. These are my powder mix. So there are powder blue, they're whiteout, there's powder orange there. There's a black and white one, which is like an Oreo crumble. And now I actually have some more started that are a combination of a cream and an orange. And there's a name for them, which I don't remember. There's one of the little, that's an Oreo crumble, which is just a morph of the powder blue or the powder mix. But I have thousands of these guys because they have done really well in my enclosures. And I need to thin them out here, so I'm going to add a bunch to this new deal. There's some little ones. And they will just populate this. There's some springtails on that one. We'll just let them run out there and populate to their heart's content. And I don't know actually how many there should be for this because I don't think anybody really knows. And I frequently see people add a few dozen or 50, and then I'm never really sure if they're being eaten or if they just die out for whatever reason. So I'm going to try to keep an eye on these and see if I can tell how many are being eaten and how many are just dying from whatever, probably desiccation if they dry out. So that's probably about 100 that I just put in there. And I will probably add another 100 this week when I just have taken out all my bark pieces, and that's all there were. So that's the easiest way to collect them, is to just take the bark pieces when they're loaded down with the isopods. So that's that. We don't need this anymore. And fingers crossed that when we come back in a month, this entire habitat will be thriving and ready for the addition of the hedgehogs, the mammals. Okay, well, thanks so much for joining us, and if you have questions about anything, please post below. I did say that I would do a separate video on the plants, which I will do sometime during the next week or two, and I'll get that posted. There's just a lot of information about the plants that I find sort of fascinating because I am a gardener and I'm kind of a plant geek, so some of you might not be as excited about it, and I'll just do that separately for people that want to watch and learn more about the plants. And then in the meantime, if you have questions, post and I will answer every question. Okay, thank you so much for joining us. Okay, I just had to call my cameraman back on a Sunday on overtime because I forgot two of the most important things. When I make a isopod culture, I always add lots of powdered eggshells and some ground up shrimp tails, and then some whole shrimp tails. And the reason I do this is for nutrition for the isopods, and there's plenty of organic material in here. Believe me, there's enough to keep them going for probably the next 5 years. But they need calcium and they need protein, and so I'll just put that right under the feed dish for the hedgehogs. And then I'm going to take some of this eggshell powder and sprinkle a ton of it around here because, whoops, not that much. I didn't mean to put that much. I'll just mix that into the soil a little bit, and then they have it. And I tend to add this every few weeks because they eat a lot of it. It's not water soluble. It will break down eventually, like it would in a compost pile. But until then, they need a lot of calcium in order to grow new shells. They are new exoskeletons, and they're constantly shedding as they grow, so they need a lot of calcium. So that, my friends, will keep them going for a while. And then every so often I just add more as I do maintenance. So I didn't want to leave that out though, because that's important if you're going to either do a bioactive with isopods, or if you're doing a separate isopod culture, you want to put in plenty of calcium sources for them. Okay, thanks.